good to be back with you again. Whenever I do those long pauses, sometimes someone will say, "I'm not hearing any sound," or they'll type that out. Sorry about that. It's probably good that I mention why I do that. I've done it. I've mentioned it a couple of times before, but I know there's a few new listeners. The reason why I pause is to call up comments so that I can read the comments. Sometimes my channel, or I have the volume on and my voice comes on, and I can't stand to hear my own voice. It's like fingernails on the chalkboard. I just don't like my own voice. So I learned if I do a big long pause, it gives me a chance to put the phone on silent, or the YouTube channel on silent, and before I can just pause it. I know it sounds stupid, but that's what I do. Anyway, outside all day doing stuff and yard, and the last couple of days it's been awesome. Pretty much harvested everything. Had a good freeze the other night or morning. Still a few tomatoes that made it through, but basically the garden has done its thing, and it was awesome. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Freeze dryer still going. We did a bunch more peaches. I love those freeze-dried peaches. So anyway, okay, this is the truth. I know anytime somebody says, well, to be honest with you, you're like, well, were you not be honest with me before? So that's kind of how I feel when I say this, but this is no joke. Come on, man. This is no joke. Who does that sound like? Early in the morning, probably, I don't know, 4:35-ish, kind of in between the wake up and I had this thought come into my head, and it was, and I know you guys are thinking, why is he thinking about this at that time? But the word abortion and the word abomination, and the thought I had was, I need to see what that connection is. Look at what that connection is. That's the thought I had. So immediately, I usually tell Sue, after, I try to remember it, and I'll tell her, hey, I need to do this sometime today. Well, that was yesterday. Might have even been the day before, I can't remember. But I kept it in my mind, and I did look it up right after. So hopefully I haven't forgotten too much. But the first three letters are critical: abo, 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 abo. So I looked up the words, and they're Latin words, and the root word of both is abo. Okay, that's the root word. And in Latin, abo means to banish, dispel, destroy, efface, obliterate, or kill. Now it gets kind of interesting, doesn't it? So those, we've talked about how an abomination is, typically it's some kind of a sacrifice of innocence. Let's just put it that way, a sacrifice of innocence. I want to explore this a little bit, and it does get a little dark, but I think it's good to shine a light, right? A nice bright light on this every once in a while. Not to be obsessed with it, but to definitely not ignore it or pretend, we don't want to do that. So abo, Latin, and that's the root word for both abomination and abortion, abo. To banish, dispel, destroy, efface, obliterate, or kill. Dang, isn't interesting, isn't it? Now, here's what's more interesting. I just kept kind of scrolling down the definition here, and as I scroll down, I get to this other really interesting thing. And it is that, now this could be a total coincidence, but it just like popped out at me. What is ABO? What is that a symbol of? It's our blood types, A or B or AB or O. Abo, blood, blood, blood. Now look, blood is an interesting concept. We think of Christ shedding his blood, right? And think of that word shed. I thought about this a lot. Think of the word shed because we think of the word shed in a lot of different ways. Like he spilt his blood. And we think of that both in the garden and on the cross. His blood was shed. We sing hymns of his blood being shed. But think of it this way. This is the thought that came to me. He shed his blood like you shed a coat, like you take it off. Or his blood became empty because that is what our mortal body is blood. That's the difference between mortal and immortal, is blood, right? Flesh and bones can inherit the kingdom of heaven, but not flesh and blood, right? So he shed his blood, meaning that his blood was replaced with some celestial fluid of some sort. He got rid of his blood. So it's just another way to think about it. I'm not saying that it replaces what we would normally think of. I'm just saying there's another thing. Now, what's the other definition of shed? It's a shelter. It's a covering. So Sukkot, the Jewish holiday feast of tabernacles, the tabernacle, the temporary. So the Jews in Jerusalem are and elsewhere, they're making these little. They've made these little huts and they stay in them, and it's to represent the children of Israel in the wilderness in a temporary dwelling, right? And it's a shed. It's a shed. So think of a shed of that. It's a covering. So Christ, he shed his blood for us, literally. It left his body, and he is our covering. He's our shed, our covering, which then gets into the sacrifice of blood of an animal that literally shed, got rid of his blood or her blood to provide skin for our covering. How cool is this, right? So blood is attached to something that's kind of, dark and sinister. But think of what Satan would want to do. What would he want to do? He would want to copy what the Savior did. So he sheds innocent blood, or has his minions shed innocent blood to make them immortal. Because by killing the innocent, you make them immortal. What does God and Christ want to do for us? He wants to make us immortal. So his death and his resurrection allows us now to be resurrected. So without him, we would not have that ability to do that. He provided for that on the cross. It's like going back to the body, the bread, the body for all, the blood for many, body for all, blood for many. All of us are going to be resurrected. So Christ's blood made that possible. So what does Satan want to do? Take the blood out of innocence so that they can become immortal. And he thinks he gets the credit for that, for killing the innocent, The light just went on in my head when I started thinking about this thing. So when we think of these evil rituals that are actually taking place, folks, you can put your head in the sand and you can go, I'm not listening. It doesn't mean it's going away. It's big, it's huge. There's even a Netflix film I was made aware of that's out. It's supposed to be kind of kid friendly, Halloween and kind of fun, kind of Disney-ish, And the principal of the school is into this weird stuff, and it normalizes it. This is going to become more and more normalized as we go along. And so what Satan is doing by promoting and pushing and inspiring, if you want to call it inspiration, demonizing people into performing these things, and what happened in the time of Jeremiah that we were talking about, these child sacrifices, it in a sense, it's an anti-Christ way to imitate. By taking the blood of innocents, you're actually making them immortal because you've killed them. So now they become immortal. You think you're gaining power from that action. You see how they're thinking? And it's always a copy. Satan is always going to try to copy Christ. Satan takes the agency out of it. Christ gives the agency. Christ gives the opportunity. I know I'm probably not explaining it how clear it is in my head, and maybe I'll do another video as it comes, because I'll admit my vocabulary isn't that great, and I know that. I've not only been told that, I understand it. It's not. I'm not in denial on that. I'm well read, but from the translation of the written word, I'm pointing to my scriptures right here, and I understand most things, but then when it comes out here, there's something lost, and so I apologize for that. But I hope I've explained enough that Christ's blood cleanses us because he shed and got rid of his blood by the resurrection. We have that same not opportunity, it's going to happen, where we are resurrected and we get that new blood because of what he did for us. And a mimic of that, an evil mimic of that, is to take the life of innocence so that you now make them immortal, and you think that empowers you. And the younger and the more innocent, the more power, because the more innocent and perfect sacrifice Christ was, the greater the power of that sacrifice. You see what this evil entity is doing out there, and what he is having his minions do. Now, and then that obviously ties into abomination and abortion, right? And even saying that word could get this video taken down, but I have to say it. I have to, because it's abo. It's abo. And I think we really need to look at it. And then if you go, further down in the definition, it's the I guess the standard of blood type, abo, ABO. It's just interesting. A couple of other really quick things I wanted to talk about. Insights from the creation, and being in the temple this last week, and the creation, the garden. So the third day of the creation is dividing the light and the dark. Well, you can't have dark without light, and you can't have light without dark. There has to be an opposite in all things. And so on the third day, this opposite. And again, sitting there in the temple, I go, the third day, the sun is providing light. And it's both S-O-N and S-U-N. It's the sun, the third day. Now, isn't that interesting with the third day of his resurrection? There's so many powers of three in the scripture You know, we have Peter, James, and John. We have the 3 days in the tomb. We have Jonah and the whale, you know, which was a type of death and resurrection coming forth, right? All of a sudden you guys are thinking of all the threes, and I've done a video on that a long time ago, the power of three. You know, we have 3 steeples or on each side of the Salt Lake Temple. The Godhead, obviously, that's the big one, the Godhead. But the 3 witnesses, I mean, you know, for us, we could go on and on and on. But I thought it was significant that it was the 3rd day. So even in the creation, it's pointing towards the resurrection of Christ laying in the tomb for 3 days and then coming forth out of the tomb. That's how I felt, because once the earth is given light, you notice that everything in the creation, and I know we like to say organization, but I'll call it creation because the scriptures do that too. But everything is dependent upon the thing that was created before it. And you know, God, remember, he caused things to happen. And we learn it more right in the temple or at the, not a different, but an opposing account of the creation, but adding to the creation. But it's caused. You know, the waters are caused to bring together. The landmass is caused. But then when it comes to man and Satan, he allowed them to do things. So with us, you know, we'll allow things to happen. You have your agency. With the elements, I'm going to cause them to do this and that. It's just kind of, but so the 3rd day, he causes the lights and the darkness to separate. And me personally, I think that was the sun. Both the S-O-N and the S-U-N, as it says in the Doctrine and Covenants, the same light that lightens our understanding is the light that lightens our world, right? It's either in 84, 88, or 93. I can't remember. It's in one of those sections. But I won't take the time to look it up right now. But that it's the same light. And then we call it the light of Christ. The light of Christ. Well, you know, he lights the world, and it was on the 3rd day. There's a Christian rock group called 3rd Day, and I love the guy's voice, and I love their music. And you know, the obvious is 3rd day, the risen Christ. But now I'm thinking, oh boy, this has a lot to do with a lot of things, and I suspect it has a lot to do with his second coming as well, the 3rd day. But I don't have any answers on that. Now, I need to, we're talking about the heart, we're talking about blood, right? Okay, I got the sweetest letter. So this is a shout out to Ken McAllister. Ken McAllister. And he lives in Idaho, I believe. And Ken wrote me this dear letter, and he had to go in and get his heart back in the right rhythm. And I don't know much about that, but I've heard about it. It's not beating at the right rhythm. I could go so many places with this, but so hopefully, Ken, you have the right rhythm. I love your letter. I love you. You're a dear friend, and I hope you get to hear this and know that our thoughts and prayers have been with you since we got this letter a couple of days ago. So God bless you. I'm just seeing if there's anything in this letter that I want to bring up. But yeah, Ken McAllister, thank you. Thank you for that. Taking the time to handwrite a letter. You know, how many of us do that anymore? I remember when we had our interview, I probably mentioned this before, with then Elder Oaks, now President Oaks, to preside over a mission. And Elder Oaks, then Elder Oaks, he said, you know, this is back when President Monson was the prophet. And he goes, you know, President Monson is so good. He goes to the hospitals, he visits people, and he goes, I just can't do that. That's just not my thing. But what I can do, I can write letters. I can write letters. And I love writing letters to people and, you know, all kinds of letters. And I'll tell you, that little statement has helped me so much, realizing that we all have our little niche, if you will. And we should be grateful for that and not feel like, oh, I've got to do that. No, I got to do it that, you know, and go around. So here's a man who is an apostle, was an apostle. Now he's in the first presidency. And, you know, there's a chance he could become the prophet and the president of the church. And here he is going, I'm not very good at doing what President Monson does. So in other words, not feeling like he has to do exactly that, you know, lift the hands that hang down and da-da-da. And I'm sure he lifted a lot of hands, Elder Oaks, now President Oaks, through his letters. But he wrote letters and he loved to do it. And Ken McAllister, you're a letter writer and you're good at it. And it was, I'm gonna cherish this letter. I'm gonna cherish it. It was very, very sweet. So we'll find our niche, you know, what we do, and not compare us to other people and other things. We want a relationship with Christ. We've been given, all of us have been given something that we do. That's our thing, you know, and we identify that through the Holy Spirit, through time, through experiences. We find out, you know, what it's not necessarily what we're good at. Not always. Sometimes it is, but it's what fulfills us and what we feel that it's our mission, right? Those are the things I'm talking about. Somebody else might be way better at it, but it's just not their mission. We find what our mission is, and then we fulfill that. There's a lot of dogs barking out tonight. Sorry about that. But I love dogs, so it's okay. Anyway, so that's it. There was more that I had on this whole blood issue, but I think if I think of more of it, or I'm sure you'll have some ideas, but always look at what the imitators are doing when it comes to Christ. And then it's easier to identify. And it also helps us understand what Christ actually did for us when we see what the imitators, the evil people, are doing. If you think about it, Adam and Eve learned a lot from Satan. They learned a lot about everything, right? And if we, you know, 2 Nephi chapter 2 and chapter 9, we learn so many things about an opposition, not opposition, but an opposite in all things. And Satan provided that opposite in the garden, which then shone the light, the light shone more on who God and Christ were. And it actually, when we think about it, it allowed Elohim to explain what the mission of Christ was because of what Satan had done. You see how that happens? So I'm not saying to embrace evil, but just have it be the identifier. And when we have eyes to see and ears to hear, we'll see it, we'll avoid it, we'll learn from it, and we'll allow that to give us a more of an understanding of Jehovah and Elohim and their relationship to us. It's kind of like when Joseph is in the garden the Sacred Grove, sorry. And they're all cool places, right? The Sacred Grove. It's like looking in the reflecting mirrors. I've said this before in the temple. Joseph is looking up and he's seeing God and Christ. And as he sees them, it helps him understand who he is because he looks like them. So he's like, we have a connection. And then as he understands more who he is, then he understands more who they are. You see? So he's a mortal, he's got imperfections, he has problems. But those very problems and those imperfections help Joseph, young Joseph, understand more who they are. And so our imperfections, it's like I was talking to Sue this morning. We were at the vet having another little checkup on our little Sonny boy. And we were sitting there looking at this cool magazine that kind of combined hunting with gardening or something. It was really kind of a funky magazine. It was awesome. And there was an article about hunting dogs in there. And I said, I've had a lot of hunting dogs over the years, and they've been wonderful. And get teared up here. But it was their imperfections that made them so endearing. Each one of them had something. Anybody that tells me they have the perfect hunting dog, I'll go, liar. You're a liar. Every dog has something, right? Because we have something. But it's those imperfections that allow us to be endearing. I don't know how else to say it. These dogs that for some reason were allowed to be our companions in this life, and I've had not the same but similar with horses, with a couple of horses in my life, but mostly dogs. I mean, I like cats, but I don't want to say anything more. But the dogs, and their little quirks of the things I had one dog that was the best retriever, but if there was water around, she would take whatever bird she had and take that bird in the water and put it under the water. I don't know why she did that. And I've had dogs with hard mouths and soft mouths. That means that sometimes they can be rough on the game they're retrieving, and sometimes they're just so gentle and soft. Some dogs are, they flush well, but they don't retrieve. Others retrieve really well, but they're kind of like a bull in the china closet, It's just, some are obedient, some aren't, and the ones that aren't that obedient, they have these other things, and so they're us. They're a reflection of us, of how we are. And I'm going to do better at looking at people instead of going, man, look at what they mean, and go. I'm actually going to think of them more in an endearing way of quirks that we all have. And I think that's how God maybe looks at us, especially when we come to him through his son, Jesus Christ, and say, I've got a problem. I've got this and this and this, and I want you to help me fix it. It's something about me that needs to be fixed, and I know it, and can you help me, kind of thing. So we can learn from those things. And anyway, I gotta stop. You guys are awesome. Love you, love you, love you. Thank you for your comments. I've had more snarky ones the last couple of videos I've done than I've had in quite a while. I feel like it's a group of, now don't take offense to this, but I feel like it's a group of women that communicate with each other that just can't stand me, anything I say. And so they've they've joined forces, and you know what? It's endearing. It's endearing. You know what? I know I can say things that rub people the wrong way. I know that. I do. And sometimes I get a kick out of it, and of thinking, oh, this is really going to get people. And that's not the best trait in the world. I understand that. But just know this. I sincerely love you folks. I always try to teach the things that I see out of scripture, out of conference talks, out of whatever, magazines, what the Spirit kind of whispered to me, you know. And from some life experience things, you know. I don't feel like I'm trying to convince anybody of something. I know I come across that way, that I want you to think how I think. And I really don't. But I have something that I like to share. It's like going to a really good movie that you just loved and you just want to tell everybody about it, or read a good book. That's kind of how I feel. And you might get somebody go, well, I saw that movie and I thought it was stupid, you know, which some of the old comedies, you know, it's, you know, that I've mentioned on this that I can never remember the name of the movies, and you guys always have to help me. Those are kind of silly movies, and I love them. Somebody else will see them and go, that's so stupid. That's how I look at some of the things I express. To me, they're I love it. But I understand that for you, some of you, a lot of you, it's nothing. And I understand that. So if they're really, really snarky comments, here's what I'm going to try to do. I'll leave them up for a few days, but I know I'll get in the mood one day and I'll look at that and go, delete. It's going to happen. And for whatever reason, I'll probably end up doing that. But I'll try to leave them up for a few days. So if people are following fairly close, they can read them and see what people are saying. But I probably won't leave them up forever, unless I forget about them. But anyway, okay, God bless. Talk to you soon. Bye.